Hey yo everybody, Haku here with my review of The Walking Dead Season 7 premiere. The day will come when you won't be. And I'm sure the case for me is the same as it is for just about all of you, and the feels are still very, very heavy with me today, even though the episode came on last night for me. So I've gone through and I've taken a ton of notes that I'm going to have to look over to remember every single little thing I wanted to say, and I still feel like I'm going to forget to say some things that I wanted to about this episode, because it was incredible. This was just, off the top of my head, right after seeing it, has to be within my top 3 favorite episodes, just because it was like such a horrible, despicable thing to go through, but also just the production and acting is... I think the production and acting was the highest quality we've seen in The Walking Dead, especially the acting. I'm convinced the acting is probably the best acting I've seen, period. Like, it was just so incredible, and incredibly well made as well. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect, because nothing is perfect, and there are some things that, in hindsight, of course, and that's the way it is with anything ever. In hindsight, you're like, okay, well, they could have changed this and perhaps made it a little bit better. But like I said, that kind of goes for everything. So, yeah, it's one of those things where even though it's not perfect, I can't imagine not... I'll go ahead and spoil now that I'm giving it a perfect score. I can't imagine not giving it a perfect score just because of how many leagues above just other things on TV this was. So... I have seen pretty much nobody, like pretty much everybody I've seen says they love this episode. I've seen pretty much nobody complaining, but the very, very few complaints I've got, even from people that loved the episode, was that it was spoiled a long time ago. And you guys know I can't stand spoilers, I don't want to talk about them. I think spoiling things is kind of a shitty thing to do. So yeah, I don't like that. And about the spoilers, of course I had seen it, because I don't think that many people hadn't seen it. I feel like if you're a fan looking at stuff online, every single... Because I don't even go to like these weird off-the-wall like videos. I don't even Google it or anything because I know Google will spoil stuff. But like, I would just look at an official AMC or The Walking Dead tweet, or look at an official trailer video or something, and every single comment is like a month after the finale. Every single comment is, it's Glenn and Abe. Or, what was it? Or like every single time somebody had a really nice, well-written comment, like, man, I think it'd be interesting if this happened or that happened, these assholes would just respond, it's Glenn and Abe. And I see a lot of people blaming AMC for this, and while there are things, once again in hindsight, that I'm like, AMC could have put a bunch of fake spoilers out there so that we wouldn't know what's real and what isn't, that would help it from getting spoiled, or it seems like they could have put more into it. But then again, on the other hand, I don't blame AMC, because I'm like, this is pretty much the biggest show on TV. If there are assholes out there who are going to make a profit, like some of the channels that do spoiler videos, that are going to make a profit from taking away from something somebody else has spent months making, then, yeah, they're going to do it. It's the biggest show ever. There are always going to be assholes out there, and it's a shame. And it's not really AMC's fault as much as it is the fault of those people commenting just, it's Glenn and Abe. That is the problem with this thing getting spoiled. It's not with AMC, it's with shitty people spoiling the fans. So yeah, with that out of the way, I wanted to say that I'm not taking anything away from the episode because of that. Because even knowing and even hearing 1,000 times over and over again, I didn't want to believe the spoilers. And even having heard them, the episode was still shocking, was still very, very good. So I don't really think that being spoiled took much away from it. There probably would have been more surprise there for me, but I don't think it took that much away. And that's another reason why I think, as I said in the finale, I thought the cliffhanger was a huge, huge mistake, and I still think it went down as a massive failure. But it was worth it. It was worth the massive failure that was the cliffhanger to get this amazing episode, and this episode works. It doesn't work at the end of last season. It works really well for the start of a season to lead us into a new storyline. So as much as I do think the cliffhanger is a failure, still, I think that failure was possibly a necessary evil in order to get what we got this episode. Of course, they could have done it better so that it wasn't really a failure, But again, hindsight 2020. And I think that's it. So yeah, let's get into the actual part by part breakdown. And of course, this is going to be very long because there's a lot of stuff I have to say, like even what I've already said. So we start off with the right-hand man scene, and I'm glad we started out with that and then looped back around, because not only do I kind of like when we do that with The Walking Dead, and we do it pretty often, it's sort of a writing and directing trait that we see a lot in The Walking Dead. I like it because we had already seen it. Everybody had already been talking about that, so if they threw it in the middle of the episode, then of course we're just going to be like, okay, we've already seen that, come on, let's get these 3 minutes over with. So I like that they started us off with that, just gave us what we've already seen, and just got that out of the way. And honestly, for me, I thought it felt stronger last night watching the episode. I don't know, something felt different about it. I couldn't tell what it was. I was trying to tell, and I've watched the episode like 2-3 times now, just rewatching it to catch stuff because it was so good. But and man, it's a hard one to rewatch. But it just, something feels different from when you watch it, like the trailer they put out of it as the sneak peek or whatever, and then you watch it in the episode. Just, I can't tell if it's the lighting, just something seems different to me. And it seems better. It seems a little bit quicker paced. I can't put my finger on it, but it's somehow more powerful to me. And again, I think it was good to show first. So we have Rick and Negan. I almost said Nick and Regan. Rick and Negan in the RV. And I thought that everything they had, all their interactions were incredible in the RV. The acting was genius. Completely genius. And I like how Rick tried to kill Negan, but he can't. And even if he did, what was he going to do then? There's like 200 saviors ready to gun down the remaining 8-9 members of his group. So yeah, there was very little he could do in that situation. And I'm glad they showed that, just to show people it's not as simple as just killing the guy. And beyond that, we have the flashes to the lineup characters thrown in here and there, which I love. Because again, it's another thing where we've seen Nicotero do it before in the episodes that he's directed, like my favorite episode, No Way Out. So we've seen that from him before, and I thought it worked really well here in the context of the episode. And just seeing Rick break down as he's remembering what happened, very, very good. I like the focus on Rick we had this episode. It made everything feel more coherent. It felt like we were in his shoes, which I think is a big thing for the episode. And it makes it seem more realistic. It didn't feel Hollywood. It didn't feel cheesy. It felt realistic. And I think that is what really propels this episode to the next level, honestly. That it did feel realistic. It didn't feel like Hollywood. So we have those flashes there. I like the Nicotero style. And Negan throws the axe out of the RV and sends Rick to go get it in the smoky haze from the burning logs from last episode. Which again, a lot of people called that they were going to go there. And I thought it was another amazing scene. I love that we had some action thrown in there. Rick having to run away and fight off walkers and stuff. Climb on top of the RV. Do his little jump later on to the hanging walker. That was all really good. Now, I like that we got that. I like we got that little bit of just straight normal action. So Rick breaking down on top of the RV for me was really, really crushing. Like as he's remembering the deaths. Again, this is a tiny bit out of order, but instead of like chopping up the review, I want to kind of keep the review in order of the episode as best I can without just jumping back and forth a ton between thoughts. So we finally do get the flashback to the kill scene, and the eeny meeny miny mo scene was so much heavier being from Rick's perspective than I thought it could have been any other way. Once again, feeling real, not feeling Hollywood, feeling real. And that made it so much better than anything I could have even thought to do. And then when he does choose Abraham, the silence. There were a lot of little things with the Abraham death that I think affected me more than the Glenn death. And honestly, from like a filmmaking and writing perspective, I like more than the Glenn death. Like so many little things like the silence and just that feeling, because we know somebody gets beaten to death after the eeny meeny miny mo scene, and we get that silence when he chooses Abraham, like, oh shit, he chose, now what? Now we have to just sit and watch him die? That silence, and just, knowing who it is, all the tension's gone now that you know who it is, but there's a brand new tension that rushes in to fill its place because we're about to see him get killed. So another thing with the Abraham death, when Abraham doesn't look away, doesn't look to any of the other characters, just stare straight at Negan's face. Perfect. That was just a perfect scene. That was like one of my favorite things in the entire episode, honestly. And also very memorable to me. So after he gets hit the first time, the suck my nuts, it was just sort of amazing how, like, he never backed down. He was like, to the end, Abraham was never going to back down against Negan, and I loved that. And also that they showed everything. That was like probably one of the more brutal things that they've shown on TV, and I've watched a bit of Game of Thrones, but this was pretty damn brutal. So we just, and him making his sign to Sasha, I didn't notice it the first time around until it was pointed out to me. I love that just the little stuff thrown in there. Sasha breaking down when she sees it. It was just so haunting, and that scene really, really sticks with me because of all of that. Sorry if I keep looking off screen to my notes a lot. But Negan then orders Rosita to look at Abe, and Daryl punches him in the face. Now this, to me, is the only weak point of the episode. Again, the episode's still worthy of a perfect score, but this to me is a weak point just because I like Daryl. Daryl is a hothead, but he is much smarter than that. He is not stupid enough for that. And I feel like, again, hindsight being 2020, a way that it could have been done better, in a way that I was predicting that maybe it would go. Maybe like they all give each other looks while he's beating, or like after Abraham's death, and they're like, okay, we need to do something, and they try to grab some of the Savior's guns or everything, or anything, and the Savior's like beat him back down, and he's like, okay, now I kill another person. That to me would have made a little bit more sense in the context than just Daryl. So yeah, it does kind of, I don't think it's bad, I just think it's not totally the best it could have been. It's the only real weak point. It's not a bad point, just a weak one. So then we had the Glenn death, and the Glenn death was, for me, even though I thought the Abraham death stuck with me more, even though I was more emotional with the Abraham death, I think, the Glenn death was so much harder to watch. It was more emotional in a different way than the Abraham death. This was more emotional in just anger and fear, and just the biggest thing for me during that death was after the first hit, they let it linger on so long that I was just screaming inside, just kill him already, just finish him off, because he sits there suffering, beaten half to death from a hit or two that he is not surviving, and it's like, just put him out of his misery, do not keep this going on. That to me was like the hardest, that was probably the hardest thing to watch on TV that I've ever seen. And the effects, the practical effects they used were just brilliant. They were so good. And every actor, like, their reaction to it, and every actor in this episode in general was just amazing here. So I'll talk about that at the end of the episode. Once I go through the episode and give general thoughts, I'm going to give my thoughts on each of the actors, because everybody was so good, but in different ways and in different scenes, I feel. So going on from the Glenn scene, also, his body twitching at the end, that was such, just another thing thrown in there, making it feel not Hollywood, but real, and just the realism, like you're actually seeing a person get killed. Just that really, really ramped up the episode. Also the angles, the perspectives they use, especially Rick's perspective, I loved. Just all of that, the lighting, everything was perfect. The setting, I loved just the way everybody looked on the gravel, the sun starting to maybe come up in a little bit. It was just too good. Like, this episode was too well made. It's so sad and depressing, so it's like, it tears you apart as a fan, because you're like, I love those two characters, I didn't want to see them die. But on the other hand, their deaths were possibly the most impactful thing that I've seen on TV, honestly. So from all of that, we have the joke from the comics of being the Lucille's a vampire bat, and that leads us back into the right-hand man scene, and I love how that was our lead back in, and it was just so strong, honestly. So we have more Negan and Rick, and again, still best acting on TV. Everything with them, with Rick getting back to the RV after Negan shoots all the walkers, and them talking in the RV, it was great. I can't think of any way to make this better. So once they get back there, Negan manhandling Rick back to the group, I think is an amazing touch. Instead of just making him walk out there, to actually just drag him, I think makes it a lot more impactful. And then we have the scene where Negan tells him, cut Carl's arm off, or I kill everybody here. Again, an incredibly powerful scene, because I was honestly thinking he was going to go for it. I thought Rick was going to have to do it. So again, great scene. And another thing about that scene that I thought was great was Michonne saying, okay, you don't have to do this, we get it. Because I was waiting all episode, I was like, somebody just, and especially Rick, I was like, Rick, just even if you don't mean it, why wouldn't you just be like, okay, I get it, even if you're lying, just lie to keep everybody alive. But just seeing Michonne say that and seeing how, like, she was obviously devastated from everything going on, but was still trying to be rational, it just fit with Michonne so well, and I liked that. I also liked the way Rick was begging for it to be him instead of Carl. And again, the acting here, this was one of the strongest performances. Rick during the Carl arm scene was one of the strongest performances I've seen in anything, honestly. So in this traumatic episode, there were still a lot of comedy bits that, rewatching it a time or two and just trying to ignore the terrible, horrible stuff and the emotional stuff, you're like, in a sick and twisted way, Negan and his group are hilarious. They have this really funny dynamic, and my favorite part of the entire thing was when Negan asks, what's that guy's name? And Simon has to pause a minute, and he's like, Daryl. So Negan's just like, Daryl, huh? That almost sounds right. That is probably one of my favorite lines in the entire episode. I loved that scene. So Negan's leaving scene was great too. The way he just dropped the axe and was like, ta-ta. Just, again, feeling like the comics, but doing their own thing with it. So good. And one thing I thought was completely necessary, I was hoping for this episode that they didn't end there, because I wanted to see a little of the aftermath. So for us to get, I think, nearly 20 minutes of aftermath was so good. So strong. Once again, very, very strong. So the aftermath scene was really good, really necessary in my opinion, and Maggie and Sasha for me were really powerful here. Everybody was, but those two of course stick out. And the most emotional scene to me, and to a lot of people from what I hear, was that Sunday dinner, what could have been scene. That was the one scene I hadn't teared up. Like, at the deaths I was like, adrenaline was rushing, hand shaking a little, but like, once we got to that scene, that's when I teared up. I was like, oh god, that is what could have been in a perfect world. They could have grown old together, but now all these characters that are all separated, once they come back together, they're not all going to be able to come back together. They're not all going to see each other again. And that was just harsh to see what Rick's vision of the perfect future was, and to know that he'll never get that. That was such a strong scene. Whoever wrote that, whoever proposed to add that in, give him a massive raise, because that, for me, took an episode that was already possibly the best made episode in my opinion, and just sent it, once again, like a lot of other things in this episode did, to an entirely different level. And then Sasha is now taking Maggie and the bodies to the hilltop, and everyone else is going to Alexandria. So I'm excited. I know we're getting Kingdom stuff next week, but I hope we get some of the Hilltop and Alexandria stuff too. Maybe not Alexandria, but I at least hope we get some Hilltop stuff. I would like to see that. So one other thing I wanted to throw in at the end that I didn't really know where else to put in this was the guy did take Polaroids of the dead bodies. So it shows that it ties in again with what Glenn found at the outpost that they raided and all of that. So it's cool to see that play back in. I'm wondering how it'll play together in the future, like if somebody's going to burn the pictures or what's going to go on there. And also, I wanted to throw in that how we had all been talking about, and a lot of other YouTubers and just fans in general have been talking about, where they said they filmed Lucille scenes for everyone. That's confirmed, because we saw the little Rick imagining everybody getting hit except himself. So it was really, really interesting to see that that is confirmed. They did at least film that for everybody. So, yeah. Overall thoughts, so many small things were done incredibly, and that's what makes the episode. It's not the big things done right, because the idea of having 2 deaths instead of 1, I think, sounds cheesy, but the actual fine-tuning and making of it was genius. And that's pretty much my thoughts on everything this episode. Taking Daryl getting up and punching Negan, all of this stuff that I'm like, as an idea, I don't really like. Putting the stuff at the beginning, like 30 minutes before we actually get to the death scenes, all of that, if it was proposed to me, I'd be like, I don't know about that idea, and then the actual production and fine-tuning of it made it great. The deaths were both really strong, moving, powerful scenes. Abraham's death, like I said, it is the saddest to me and sticks with me the most, I think, but Glenn's was certainly the hardest to watch and the hardest to endure. And I love, one of the biggest things I love about this episode, it didn't feel Hollywood. It felt real. It felt real. It felt like there was a lot of realism put into it, and that makes it an entirely different beast. So yeah, like I said, I hated the double deaths as an idea, but in execution, no pun intended, I completely love what happened. There was a bit of me at first that thought that Glenn's death kind of overshadowed Abraham's, just because of the way it was thrown in as a shock, but then watching it a couple more times, everything is a lot more balanced, everything is a lot more strong. Like, the first time watching it, it was an incredible episode, but an incredibly hard to endure episode because of just how intense it was, but then watching it a few more times, and just looking at some finer things, it was just so good. I can't even compare it to any of the other episodes. Even my favorite episode is No Way Out, but this, even to that, this is probably better made. I just personally prefer No Way Out. I like the happy endings, or yeah, the somewhat happy endings. So we've got, again, because the acting is the best on TV, and because of everything else, I am giving it 10 vampire bats out of 10. I already said I'm giving it a perfect score. And now I want to talk about each of the actors. I'll do it by character name instead of actor name, since it'll be quicker to go through that way. Aaron, I think, did a great job. I love how he was horrified and sad. I love the one scene, because I rewatched it, like after I took the notes, I rewatched it one more time to right before I recorded this, just for the extra like freshness of my memory. I loved the scene at the end where he's comforting Maggie and going to get Glenn's body. I thought Aaron was great there. Michonne, trying to stay rational but completely broken by the losses, I really liked. I liked how she was quiet, but then when she tried to reason with Negan, that was a perfect time for her to chime in. Simon, I thought, was like, he was a funny character, but he was also just cold and nonchalant. Like, this was just all business to him, which, perfect way to do the scene, perfect way to do the episode. Eugene was great at portraying like just the overwhelming horror of losing his best friend and then just having to witness Glenn. Eugene was great there. Daryl, Norman Reedus here, I thought had probably the greatest range we have seen from him, and I think he's a great actor, but this was probably my favorite performance from him, because we had the sadness, the regret from him after seeing what his action caused, just the fear from Norman Reedus was man, the range was so good within this episode. Sasha, another one, was one of my favorites, just because she seems so sad and broken, but then at the end, she was determined, even though she was fighting through all of that. And Sasha, to me, felt like a very real character. She felt like a real person there. Like, that's how well it was done. Carl, I love how, because even sometimes, like, I think in the comics, Douglas discusses it with Rick. He's like, you're one of those people that hears a tragic story on in the news and gets angry instead of sad. and you want whoever did this wrong thing to pay for it. And I personally kind of feel that way a lot. Like if I hear somebody murdered somebody, I get more angry than sad. And I love that is Carl's character right there. He was just cold and angry, and a part of it almost makes you feel a disconnect, but I liked the way that Chandler Riggs was able to accurately portray, just instead of crying, he just held it back and just seemed like he was seething, just so pissed off at Negan. And I really like the way they did that without overdoing it, of course. Rosita, again, at first I didn't think Rosita's performance was that great. I was like, she was kind of quiet, but that's kind of Rosita's character a lot of the time. But no, after rewatching it, her performance, one of my favorites again. She was like devastated, but trying to remain her hard character that she's normally in, even though she's devastated. So good. Maggie, next up. Again, she felt very, very real, and I thought that was great. Especially her reactions to the actual death, I thought were good, but at the end, with her talking to Rick and everyone, at the end after Negan left, that was the high point for Maggie's character, or for the acting for Maggie's character there. It was just geniusly done. Glenn was so freaking strong of a performance here. I loved his reactions during the Abraham death. It was one of the most powerful to me. And just the fear and the pain was palpable from him. So Stephen Yeun did an amazing job. Abraham for me was like just fearless and calm, and just the way he looked at Negan and everything and his reactions and everything. I would say Michael Cutlett's performance as Abraham was my third favorite from this episode. It was just that good to me. And he wasn't even there after he got killed off halfway through, but it was my third favorite. His was such a strong performance. My second favorite performance was Rick. Rick had just a freaking amazing range. Like, it was... Rick's may even be my favorite. It just, again, felt so real. It's the realest acting I think I've felt on TV. It was like he didn't care. Again, not Hollywood feeling. Like, it seemed like he didn't care how he looked. He didn't try to look like he was in a movie or on TV. And it just came out so perfectly. And my favorite for this episode was Jeffrey Dean Morgan's portrayal of Negan, because I was questioning it. At season 6, I was questioning it, but this was just a million levels ahead. This was the perfect Negan. He made you hate him and think he was just despicable, but also he was so funny and he had such charisma, and that's what Negan from the comics is. You hate the stuff he does, but he's the funniest and possibly most entertaining character. So that is how I felt here with Negan. I felt like I hated him a lot more here than I did when he killed Glenn in the comics. I hated him more, but he was still, going back and watching it, he was friggin' hilarious, and just, he felt lovable even though you hated him. So I just thought it was a genius performance, and way, way above what it was at last season's finale. This is what Negan on TV should have always been. I loved it. So, yeah, I feel like I have pretty much nothing but good things to say here. Like I said, it wasn't perfect. There were some issues here and there, but most of them were small issues, and most of them are things that I don't really blame AMC for, and they come from the spoilers, and that comes from just kind of the bad side of fans, you know. So yeah, there's no big episode harming problems, I feel. There are a couple weaker parts, but nothing that isn't good. Nothing that I don't find very, very... I don't want to say enjoyable to watch, because it was hard to watch, but nothing I don't find is of just kind of the highest quality. So yeah, like I said, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, and that's really all I've got with this one. So if you did like this video, comment down there and tell me what you thought of my 30 minutes worth of thoughts, and what you thought of the episode yourself, because I'm sure you guys probably have a lot of really, really cool insights and a lot of cool opinions on what you think as well. So I'm definitely interested to hear them and discuss them and everything. Also, what else we got now? Subscribe for more of The Walking Dead. I will be doing a prediction video this Friday, and I'll be doing predictions every Friday, or sometimes Thursday, maybe if I put it out early. But I'll be doing them every Thursday or Friday for the coming episode that Sunday, and then Monday nights will be my reviews. I can't get them up Monday during the day because I'm working on my Tower of God live reaction, and I can't do them Sunday night because by the time the show goes off and I watch Talking Dead, if I did a review, I would be up till like 5 in the morning, and I am not doing that every Sunday when I have to get up and do stuff Monday. So Monday nights will be my review pretty much every single week for this entire season. So yeah, subscribe for more of The Walking Dead and more of a bunch of other stuff on the channel too if you want to check it out. And follow on Twitter as well. I'll try to keep you updated there on stuff I do for the channel, and when I post stuff, push stuff back, whatever. And one last thing before I go, I want to scold some people. To all these shit bags out here saying, oh man, I was sad. I'm sad I predicted it. But damn, I predicted that it was Glenn and Abe. Fucking no, you didn't, bud. Nobody predicted it was Glenn and Abe. They either heard spoilers or they heard spoilers. So these people that are saying, my predictions was that Abraham would die and then Daryl would jump up and Glenn would die, that's specific as hell. You heard it from comments like a month after the finale. You are lying through your teeth, bud. So yeah, I've just seen that so many times that it really bugs me. Like, just seeing all these people like, oh, I called it. I knew it was those two. I knew it was going to be exactly those two. There was going to be more than one death, and there was only going to be two, and it was going to be those two characters exactly. Bullshit, buds. Call them bullshit on that. But either way, guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time.